this in terms of policy and practice as we have it in education today, particularly the policies. That has been a point we have never been able to agree on. Sir, Your Excellency, I'd be grateful for your contribution.
Thank you, ma'am, for allowing me at least ventilate my own views. And I thank my colleagues for allowing me share their session. I take on board all of what has been said, but I think I probably have more questions to ask, especially now that we have two professors sitting here. I ask myself, are we being emotional about the educational challenge, or are we being logical? And if we talk about, I've heard put more money in schools, but day after day, since 1999, more classrooms have been constructed across this country. More desks have been put in. They may not have taken us to the quality of sophistication of classrooms that we want, but clearly there has been input. Why is there not the result? And now that's a question about logic and emotion. What really is the nature or the yield curve of an investment in education? Is it a 5-year yield curve? Is it a 25-year yield curve? And unless we understand that this is a long journey, we should stop tearing out our hair. That doesn't mean that the problem will be solved today. But we must understand that if we want to see the results of the investment in education, they won't come overnight. Now, and in terms of emotion, I've heard stuff like, look, there are 10 million pupils out of school. How did we get that number? Who has interrogated that number? That does not suggest to me that, look, there are no children out of school. But what are the actual numbers? Do we even have a valid census for the country? And before we start repeating dogmas, we should be careful. Because if we can't diagnose and measure the problem appropriately, we will never be able to solve it. Now, there are children out of school. How many are they? Who knows? By what empirical basis did you make that determination? A number thrown at us from people who don't live here? Now, if those children are out of school, why are they out of school when primary basic education is free in many parts of the country? Why are they out of school? What is the problem now? There is now lack of access of an indeterminate number that we don't know. But there is also classrooms built. There is free education. Why are they not there? So if you throw money at that, you are not solving the problem. Unless you understand. If I may, and then move on. What is really the purpose of our education? Education is not an end. It is a means to a larger national and global objective. What does this nation want to become in 20, 30 years' time? And it is that national objective that you educate for. The lions, the animals in the wild, continuously educate their children for survival in the wild. They teach them how to hunt and how to kill so that they can continue to survive and reproduce. What do we want to do for the next generation? And therefore, we cannot discuss education in abstract, in a vacuum. Now, quickly, we've talked about more classrooms, more this. The truth is that government is not putting more money. That may be very legitimate. But the truth is that no matter how much, you can't throw money at the problem. Government doesn't teach. It is people who do so. Classrooms on their own don't teach. It is people who teach. Now, have we looked at the people who are supposed to teach? Have their methods changed in 1 decade, in 2 decades, or in 3 decades? Are they resisting a scrutiny of their own methods themselves? And is the finger pointing always at the other side or at themselves? So this, for me, are some of the questions that I want to ask, because if the debate today is about quality, who is supposed to give that quality? It is the man or the woman, or the man and the woman in the classroom. If you don't have it, you can't give it. Now, if we argue about Chief Awolowo, the problem was different. The problem was mass illiteracy, where letter writers were the lord of the manor. They wrote letters for you and interpreted letters for you. And therefore, free education came to solve that problem. We have a relative level of literacy now. We are not there yet, over 55%. But we are facing a more fundamental problem of quality. Employers are saying, we have to retrain graduates. I'm done, man. Thank you, man.
Yes, I agree he did, but I have a soft spot. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, we have had some very fundamental questions. You see, way back in 1969, when for the first time we could sit down as a country and write out a policy of education, we wrote all of these down. That is my generation. We did. Why are we going to school? What do we want to get out of the program? And how are we going to make progress? We also stated that, not in the book itself, but later on at general meetings, when NCE used to meet, not the National Certificate in Education, sir, that for every period, maybe a 5-year period, maybe a 10-year period, we should reassess what we have spent in what state, maybe when we had just 4, but by which time we were getting 12, and later on 19, how much we have spent on education and what is the result, and use this as a base. If my colleagues were here, they would prove me right here. As a base, I was only a senior lecturer, of what we could do with the results of this education. All of those things have been thrown into the waste paper basket. We did write all of these things down, and we figured out that if we did the examinations of the states, and each state used to then submit reports every 6 months, which were followed through every year, to make more decisions. But some of those decisions which were difficult to take, action was difficult to take on this because it would show that there had been little or no growth in those parts. So that is the first part to your question. Maybe what I would suggest, because I can't go on talking, I can't be disciplining other people and not disciplining myself, is that, one, maybe the Governors Forum should have a clear decision on having a subcommittee work into the past and into the present as to how they have treated education. And you'll find that there are large differences in the ways most governments have treated education. And for that matter, 1965 would be rather different from when was it that we became 37 states? 36 states. The differences, yes, the differences would be great. But some of those that had been states for that long a time, and believe me, I would like to mention Lagos and Bendel, Midwest, you would find that these things were followed through. But if you have a lazy leadership at the top, then they are not followed through. If you have a non-cohesive putting together of what we are doing and what we expect to do, they would not be followed through, and each person would bring a new era into what he or she is doing for that state. I'm sorry if I'm sort of boasting about being old, but it is a fact that we did ask these questions, and when we started thinking about developing universities, we also thought about what that middle section, what is known as the JSS 1 to 3 and the SS 1 to 3. What are you educating them for? And where are the teachers you are bringing to widen this education and to make it more meaningful and more full of answers than we were giving out? But most things got turned upside down when we had so much money from oil, sir. I'm not blaming that we had oil. I'm blaming us for not going back a little bit into history and doing it. Let me give you an example which I quote quite frequently. We thought that as we became an independent country in 1966, we would also teach the social sciences. That didn't mean we were not going to teach history and geography. But to my surprise, a few years later, I was at meetings when the leaders of states and so forth would come that now we are abandoning history and geography. Far from it. Why we brought in social sciences was very simple and straightforward. We are an independent country now. That does not mean that we are not teaching history and geography. In fact, we have more reason to teach history and geography. But we are introducing new institutions into governance. And from primary school, we should know what these new institutions do. For instance, we don't want to say a policeman is your friend. I agree he's your friend, but what is the nature of work for a policeman, for a magistrate, for a lawyer, for a legislative person, etc., etc. Forgive me if I, again, am dwelling too much on the past, but I think it is necessary for this Governors Forum, which I believe is a very important part, looking at what you have done in the past 3 years, what you intend to use the conclusions you have for, it is something for you to go back home and bring together, especially in the area of education. What are we going to do for our children in school, and how are we going to change the mindset of persons who go to universities, attend these universities for 7 years instead of 3 or 4, don't have a worthy certificate, and come back and can't get jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, thank you for the opportunity given me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. And thank you very much, Your Excellencies. You have done. Please give them a...
Well, a final contribution from Professor Grace Alele Williams, former Vice Chancellor, University of Benin, on improving access and quality education at sub-national level. And that's one of the topics treated today at the 3rd Nigeria Governors Forum Retreat at Eco Hotel in Lagos.